Prime Minister and the President spoke today. I also spoke with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, a bit earlier at noon today, and the Minister of Finance, Dominique Leblanc, and the Secretary of Commerce in the U.S., Howard Lutnick, spoke together. Now, we will make sure that we continue to defend Canadians' interests in the context of this unjustifiable trade war that was launched by the U.S., and also we'll make sure that we will never negotiate against ourselves. And so we will be there to stand strong. And it's not true that we will go through this psychodrama every 30 days. So our goal is to make sure that we're having conversations to bring back much more certainty.
Trump and Trudeau spoke, and you spoke with your counterpart as well. So once again, what do you think that he's calling Trudeau again, Governor Trudeau? And now they're referring to each other with their first names. So we understand that these are difficult conversations.
Les conversations sont constructives, mais il y a
The conversations are constructive,
des émotions liées au fait qu'elles sont
but of course,
ces tarifs-là sont complètement injustifiés.
We have to remain without emotion. These are unjustified tariffs. Canada is seeking to reject the imposition of these tariffs, and we know that these are not necessarily related to border issues. We have to remember that the President, his powers are based on imposing these tariffs, and he has not demonstrated that there's a national security issue at the border. Therefore, based on that, we believe that we need to continue to strengthen the border and work together to save lives related to the scourge of fentanyl. But fundamentally, what we think that the President wants is much bigger than the issue of fentanyl. His goal is to weaken us, and once he has done that, and then, de facto, he thinks he could annex us. He said that in the past. So, based on that, our goal, therefore, is to find diplomatic solutions. And as the head of our diplomatic efforts, I will continue to do that. So, our eyes are wide open.
Of course, there are frustrations that we have because of the fact that we think that these tariffs are completely unjustified and unjustifiable. These tariffs stem from a presidential executive order linked to the fact that there's a national security crisis at the border linked to fentanyl. And we know that this is a bogus argument. This is not true, particularly when it comes to the northern border. So, based on that, we will continue, of course, to engage on the border, make sure that we can save lives against fentanyl and the scourge of fentanyl. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we stand strong and we'll never negotiate against ourselves. And I've said that many times, and I'll continue to say that. And as Canada's top diplomat, my job is, of course, to find a solution that is anchored in principles and diplomacy. But we need to make sure that there's more trust and much more predictability coming from the other side.
How do you negotiate with an administration whose position changes by the day?
But that's been a challenge. So the fact that the goalpost seems to change many times and that many other issues that are not linked to trade have been put on the table is definitely a challenge. And so that's why when we negotiate, we're not only looking at the issue of the border, we're not only looking at the issue of trade, we want to make sure that we bring back things much more into a box where we ultimately can be in a much more stable relationship. There's too much unpredictability and chaos coming out of the White House right now.
In French? Well, basically, I pretty much answered that already in French, but what I can say is that our goal is to reach an agreement, and that's an agreement that will protect jobs in Canada and ensure that we can have a strong and safe border together. But fundamentally, the Americans have not put all the trade-related issues on the table. They went much further. So our goal is to bring negotiations back to the table and try and create a situation where there is less unpredictability, where the issues on the table, and where we can put that in a box and create more trust between both countries.
So I want to ask you about the auto industry. What is Trump trying to do here? Is this about forcing automakers to at least promise to move production to the U.S.? And if you can also answer the question.
I won't talk for President Trump, but clearly we need to make sure that we fight for jobs, including, of course, in the fantastic auto sector. And that's the case also for the jobs in the steel sector, in the aluminum sectors, and all the different sectors across the board. But we know how much the auto sector is important to Ontario, and therefore for the country, and we'll fight for it. Mais on sait que je répondrai pas pour Monsieur Trump.
I can't respond for Mr. Trump. But what I can say is that we're going to fight for each and every job, including in the auto sector, which is very important for Ontario, but also the rest of the country. And we'll fight not only for the auto sector, but also for the aluminum sector and the steel sector and all other sectors in the country. It's about protecting jobs and also have a stable, predictable trade relationship.
Yeah. Would you impose oil and potash export taxes over the objections of Saskatchewan and Alberta?
So the Prime Minister has been meeting also with premiers of provinces and territories, and we will make sure that we have strong national unity based on that, working with them, and no sector will be pitted against another. The goal is to make sure that we are protecting jobs in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, in Ontario, in Quebec. And more we're united, more we'll win. So, and we know that because we know that at the end of the day, the Americans will be divided because a lot of Americans will be suffering from these tariffs. We've said that time and again. We know that this will cost more for American people at the pump, more at the grocery stores, more when they buy a new house. And so in that context, we know that there are a lot of people in the US that are against these tariffs. And so more we're united and more we're explaining to the Americans how much this is affecting them as a tax on them, more we'll be able to win.
Okay. And you mentioned Ukraine earlier. How can Canada help Ukraine? What more can it do when our defense budget is relatively paltry?
Well, we've increased our defense budget. We also will continue to be one of the most important supporters of Ukraine. We've given a lot of military aid, but also financial support. When you account everything that we've done on the military side, but also on the financial side, which has helped Ukraine to build its own military production lines and its own capacity to be able to win on the battlefield. We are part of the 8 most important donors to Ukraine, and we're very proud of it.
Hi, Minister.
Yes.
I'm from the Canadian Press.
Yes.
My first question for you is would Canada remove some of its counter tariffs to if the U.S. reduces tariffs, let's say, to 10% or 15%, or do you want the U.S. tariff to be entirely removed?
Listen, I won't negotiate in public, so I won't say what are the different strategies, but what I can tell you is that we're well supported, and there are really great trade experts that are getting involved into these different conversations. But at the end of the day, it is not true that Canadians will go through this unpredictability every 30 days. It's enough. We need to make sure that we stand strong, that we fight, that we have strong counter tariffs, and meanwhile, I'm calling on all Canadians to do their part. We need to make sure we're buying Canadian. We need to make sure also that if we're planning to have a vacation in the US, well, maybe it's time to actually have a vacation in Canada or elsewhere in the world. So there are different things we can do, but this is existential to make sure that our friends and families and everybody keeps their job. And this is something that we need to be united on, and I'm convinced we will be.
The follow-up question I have for you is Trump now says that the Prime Minister is trying to use tariffs and the trade war to stay in power and not have an election. I'm wondering what you thought.
Listen, Canadians know that there will be a new leader of the Liberal Party on Sunday. And then eventually in the coming days, there will be a new Prime Minister. I have no other comments on that. Thank you.
Peut-être un mot en français là-dessus. Justement, Donald Trump qui parle de... On ne sait pas quand la prochaine élection fédérale canadienne.
Trump mentioned that we don't know when the next federal election is going to be. We all know that there's going to be a new leader of the Liberal Party on Sunday, and thereafter a new Prime Minister. And that will come in the following days. So I have no comment on that. Thank you.